Welcome to Not Just Money with your hosts, Doretta and Lee. This isn't your typical podcast about finances. It's a podcast about all the money conversations we aren't having, sometimes not even with ourselves. Join us on this journey of hard truths, lived experience, and the wisdom that comes from both. Because money is never just about money.
Hey, Lee, y'all ready for today's deep dive on getting out of debt?
You know it. And not just because it's such an important topic. I'm excited because we're welcoming our very first guest to Not Just Money. And such a wonderful first guest she is. Stacy Yanchuk Oleksy, CEO of the not-for-profit debt counseling service Money Mentors based in Alberta. Stacy has dedicated her decades-long career supporting people dealing with debt in several nonprofit credit counseling agencies. Before becoming CEO of Money Mentors, she led Credit Counseling Canada and held various director-level positions at another nonprofit credit counseling agency. Stacy is a certified financial counselor, a certified educator in personal finance, and a certified professional coach. Her academic background includes a Master of Science in Family Ecology and a Bachelor of Science in Human Ecology, as well as certifications in Mental Health Leadership and Human Resources Leadership. Actually, side note, because we all know I love a good side story, I met Stacy at the start of my financial literacy journey. It was the first conference I was speaking at on this topic, and Stacy was also speaking at the same session. I was pretty nervous, and Stacy went first. And that only made it worse because I was like, I have to follow her. I mean, she effing crushed it. And, we'd eventually become BFFs. And that was almost like 2 decades now. And I just think it's so fitting that Stacy is the first guest we bring on the show because she was also my first financial literacy friend.
That is so sweet.
So epic. Oh, I love it. And you know what's so cool about that, though, is I remember when you and I called each other to talk about that conference presentation. As soon as you started to talk, I'm like, oh, she's really cool. I want to be friends with her. I wonder if I'm going to overwhelm her if I ask her if we can be friends.
Stacey, we are thrilled to have you here today.
Oh, thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and I mean, not the kind of resume stuff, but how it is that you decided to devote your career to helping people get out of debt? Because that's really a kind of amazing step.
Yeah, and it's kind of cosmic. So when I was in university, my original degree, my bachelor's degree, we had a practicum. And I went to the Victorian Order of Nurses because I was focused on family studies and I worked with adults or seniors in an adult day program. Tons of fun, lots of fun. But my friend, who ended up becoming my bridesmaid, actually worked at Credit Counseling Services of Alberta, which used to be Money Mentors. And she did her practicum there. And I always thought it was so cool. And then years later, I got headhunted into Money Mentors to come full circle and start back. But truly, I mean, how it worked out is I was teaching at UBC. I was in employment services and I was teaching at UBC as a sessional. And one of my guest speakers was Julie Jaggernath. She was the director of education at the Credit Counseling Society. So we grabbed coffee after because I wanted to pick her brain. And she said, you know what, we're looking for a program director. I'm like, I think I'm interested. I met with Scott Hanna, the late CEO of CCS. I slipped him a 20, and then I met with Gary, the VP, and I slipped him a 22. I faxed them a 20, and he gave me the job. And then it's literally been like, it's history, right? Like that's how I got started.
We talk about using money as a tool. I'm not quite sure that's what we had in mind.
Whatever works sometimes, right? But when I first met you, Stacy, it's like this was your calling. And obviously you've stayed in this field for this long. And it's so great to see people who really kind of find their passion and their space. And of course, you've been in this, business for a long time. What are you seeing in terms of trends?
Yeah, I I typically am an optimist, right? As you know, Lee, I tend to lean on the optimistic side and tend to be fairly positive about things. But, some of the trends I see out there are a bit worrisome, right? There's so much access to credit. Our debt loads are going up again. So, we had that reprieve during COVID where everyone was saving money and not spending as much. And then we all kind of thought in the financial literacy world, like, whoa, everything we taught it worked. No, it didn't. Because as soon as things opened up, right, people started to spend. We're seeing certainly more buy now, pay later coming through. We're seeing unlicensed payday loans coming out of Quebec or overseas that are really impacting consumers because they won't follow the regulations and the rules. So, and what we've noticed here at Money Mentors in Alberta is that post-COVID, we've really picked up on the mental health and finances. People are coming in really stressed. They're anxious. They're depressed. And it's impacting their lives, I would suggest, more than, pre-pandemic times. Because I think we're all still living post-pandemic, right? It's like, even though the pandemic is over, there's still legacy, mental health impact. So I think we're seeing a lot of stressed consumers because the cost of living is high. I always joke when you look at groceries, you're getting a bag of apples for $9 to $11. It doesn't come with a massage, and it certainly doesn't come with caramel. It's just apples. Like, and no offense to apples and apple producers, but come on, it's apples, right? But $9 for a bag is insanity, right? And consumers are just having difficulty keeping up. And so they're using their credit to supplement, their living expenses.
So you mentioned a little bit about unregulated financial products. That's really interesting. So do you think that's changing the debt landscape a little bit? You're accessing this credit. Of course, there's other issues of affordability, that's a little separate to that. But do you think that is going to ultimately get Canadians into more trouble over time, especially if, they're not controlled in any manner?
Absolutely. Yes, because you know what? I mean, people will go down the line of desperation, right? You first start out with your financial institution or your credit union, and then you don't get there. So then you go to a high interest lender and you don't get anything there, right? So then you go into payday loans and then you go into unlicensed. I think it's pretty scary and it's a slippery slope. And while it's not going to impact every Canadian, thank goodness, the ones that are impacted severely. And we're not talking the regulated payday loans. Like, and I know everybody bitches and moans about them, and I'm not promoting them by any stretch, but they do fill a need in the community. And unless somebody else is going to get into it, the universe abhors a vacuum, right? But these are the unlicensed, unregulated ones that are not abiding by the collection rules. We actually had a client lose their job because even if they were on OPD, Orderly Payment of Debt Program, which is a restructuring program for us that we operate, the payday loan company wouldn't respect the fact that they shouldn't call the client. They kept calling them all day long at their job. And finally, the employer's like, look, man, like, I can't do this. You're fired. And they lost their job. I heard from a licensed insolvency trustee that was having a similar experience because they're not abiding by this, by the rules.
That's terrifying. I can't
It is.
imagine, and I think that would probably compound the mental health
Oh,
crisis on that too.
now you have no control. And the rules should apply because we live in a rule-based society, but they're not applying. And that's deeply concerning for me.
Wow. So now that we're post-COVID or still dealing with those effects, are you seeing a change in the profiles of people who are coming to knock on your door?
I don't know that it's a change per se. I think we're just seeing more people come through our door, right? That wouldn't have necessarily had a financial crisis. Like, this isn't just folks that, have made a bad decision, right? Or a lifetime of, decision making. Sometimes life just kicks you straight in the mouth, right? And all you can do is go down and then pick up the pieces. And so, we're seeing the economic shocks that we just can't tolerate them as much anymore, right? There's no more space in the budget. There's no more space in wages. So I think things are just it's almost like the frog boiling to death in the water, right? I don't think that this has been a significant, like, oh my goodness, we went from black to white. It's just we're boiling to death in debt.
We hear a lot about younger folks really struggling. Are you seeing that in your client base, that the ages are starting to get younger, or are they fairly consistent with prior years?
We're definitely seeing that, younger people are being impacted. And certainly here in Alberta, right? Youth unemployment is through the roof. So it's hard to go find a job. Therefore, it's hard to get your life started, and you might be leaning on family for living expenses or just living. And you might be leaning on your credit too. So we're definitely seeing that folks are getting younger, and it's just access as well.
I think the landscape changes are really interesting. One of the things I wonder is if there is an increase in the visibility of some of these things, and I wonder if maybe young people are a little bit more likely to ask for help now, that they know a little more, and maybe it's like in a weird way, kind of a good thing in the sense that they're willing to ask for help.
I think it's a remarkable quality of the younger generations, right? Is that there's a whole lot less shame. Like if you look at my generation, even millennials to a certain extent, and then older, right? We have a big closet of shame and skeletons, like debt skeletons in our closet that we're ashamed of. So I appreciate that the younger generation just kind of opens up the closet and goes like, we're letting the air in. So I think that's cool, and good. And it worries me apparently I'm worried a lot, but I worry, right, about where young people are getting their financial advice. When we talk about finfluencers, and that's air quotes because that's not a real word, right? That's concerning for me. What are your qualifications and who are you? Spouting off, financial advice. The risk of doing so is significant. So I think, I always encourage people, buyer beware.
I wonder if we could look a little bit more generally and think about things like what are the biggest misunderstandings that people have about debt and about getting out of debt?
Yeah. First of all, people think that debt will come for you. And here's the beauty about debt is it does not discriminate. It is so open-minded and so inclusive that it will welcome everyone in. People think that debt only comes for folks with low income. People think that, debt, if you've got high income, then you shouldn't have debt, or if you do, it's not a big deal. There are misperceptions of the impact and the insidiousness of the impact of debt on mental health and physical health. Your backache never feels better because you've got debt distress, right? Or you're indebted. Your anxiety and depression will always be exacerbated with higher debt levels, right? And so I think we think that it's a them problem. It's not necessarily a us or a we problem, but it does not discriminate. It'll take them all on. And I think what we think is, I can just get out of it, right? I'll just budget my way out of it. I'll just try my way out of it. I'll get another loan and I'll use credit to get out of it. We try really, really hard in Canada to handle it on our own. We don't typically succeed. It is really difficult, especially with high interest rates, right? To pay down your debt, not reuse it, and keep paying it down with avalanche or snowball methods. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline, and it's tough.
Yeah. The idea that you can use debt to get out of debt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
debt's really
Ugh.
good. Is it again? It welcomes everyone in.
And when you mean try to solve it ourselves, you mean kind of the individual, like they're not going to go and seek some professional help or credit counseling guidance. It's like, okay, well, I have this debt. I'm just going to tighten my belt this month in the next 6 months, and spend less in these categories and see if I can manage that.
There's real shame attached to asking for help and getting a proper solution, right? Whether it's a consolidation loan through your financial institution, or debt restructuring through nonprofit credit counseling, or insolvency solutions through a licensed insolvency trustee. There's a whole lot of you have to face the facts, right? And those facts don't feel real good when you're looking in the mirror. Like we move from what is, I consider like a social problem and a societal problem. And when there's debt, we bring it right into the individual. And now it's your problem. So it doesn't matter that the society is, your wages haven't kept up or life kicked you in the mouth. It's now your problem. And we have a perception that if you've got debt, you've got problems. And if you've got debt, maybe you're irresponsible with money. And maybe you're just not a good decision maker. And let's keep going, right? Let's take your net worth. How much are you worth financially? And let's just smooch it right in with self-worth, because that's what we do with the individual, right? So then you go underground with it. And what I mean by that is like when you just feel like you just don't know, like I don't know how to change I actually do know how to change my own oil, but let's say I don't, right? Okay. So I go ask my mechanic Okay, he's going to look under my hood and figure it out. There's no shame in not knowing how to change my own oil, right? But if I don't know how to manage my money, oh, there's shame. And so what we start is we feel stupid, we feel dumb, right? We're embarrassed by it. And then we go right underground and we go into shame. And as soon as we're in there, we're in the dark and nobody's allowed in. And you'll see people's bodies. It's fascinating. People will literally curl up on themselves, right? Their shoulders will curl in. They'll hunch over. They're trying to protect themselves, right? Whereas as soon as you open up the closet door, you put the lights on and you go, you know what, girl or dude, you're not alone. Trust me, you are not alone. And I've made bad mistakes. I have completely, effed it, and I'm still standing. So if I can, you can, right? And as soon as we open up the closet, put the lights on, like I get goosebumps when I talk about that, right? Because as soon as someone acknowledges shame and doesn't judge you, you can breathe again, right? It helps you remember in your body that you are human. You're a soul having a human experience. And right now it's just a really crappy human experience, right? But you're not
Yeah.
alone. And for every money problem, there is a money solution. It may not be tasty or a lot of fun, but there is a solution available.
And what's really interesting is because last week episode, we really focused on money stories. And so that's
Mhm.
really tied into that, where it's like, what is the narrative that you put on yourself? And of course, that's a journey, right? It starts when you first start understanding value and money to all the traumatic experiences, to then you compound some of these quote unquote, maybe mishaps or mistakes, whatever you want to call it. And then it just further alienates you from getting good money habits or really taking control of your financial life. And I find that that's really interesting, right? As you're kind of going through debt and thinking about it and having these conversations. So when we look at, and every client is different, and we definitely recognize that, but if we look at the journey of your clients, how long does it really take them to get out of debt? And do you know if then they're able to stay out of debt, or is this just kind of a cycle that kind of perpetuates?
Yeah, it certainly depends on the person, right? Their numbers, everything is dependent on their numbers. So their income as well as their debt load. Higher debt loads sometimes can take longer times, right? But we've also seen clients that are committed, right? They'll take tax refunds and put it down on their debt, right? Because they just want to get out of debt that much sooner. Typically, we're talking about 4 to 5 years if they're on the orderly payment of debt program. We can go up to 5 years. If they have a student loan, we can actually increase the term to 10 years. But that's within the structure of the program. But we're talking probably on average about 4 years to get out of debt. Um, my experience is that when you don't have a plan and it's just kind of all in your head and you're stressed about it, the story just consistently gets bigger and bigger, right? Where now it becomes this all-consuming story. Once you've spoken, and I'm biased, right? Because I believe in nonprofit credit counseling, but when you chat with a certified financial counselor, we'll see clients and I'll see them as well. They'll come in 10 out of 10 of stress. Like their toes are wrapped around the edge of their map and they're ready to launch off. With a conversation, a proper budget, and a proper plan, you can bring someone down to like 7 or 6, right? Because as soon as you have a plan with your money, then you just got to go work your plan, right? Do your automatic payments, set it and forget it, and then move on. It's the not having a plan and the emotion of it that makes it so much bigger.
Does it typically take before um, people will come and ask for help?
It takes a lot. It really does. And that's the tragedy, right? If I could get a t-shirt made to say, like, if you came a year earlier, life would be easier. Like, there are way more options at the beginning when your arm first gets sore versus when it's falling off, right? Once the arm is starting to fall off, we've got some options. It's called
Uh,
amputation. I'm not
oh.
saying
So,
financial, right? But
so let's dig into that a little
yeah,
bit, Stacy. What are the potential options that are available? That I know that there are a couple of major bucket
yeah.
options. So what
Mhm.
do those look like?
Yeah, I always say that there's three major buckets when it comes to debt repayment. The first is the DIY, right? Do it yourself. You can, I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I was teaching at a local technical college, just a financial literacy class. And I would do this experiment where I would go, okay, y'all, you students are going to be the credit counselors and I'm going to be the client. I've got debt. What are some options to pay it off? And so we start brainstorming and it's stalling out. I'm like, folks, it starts with B. Kid right up at the front, first row, hand up. Oh, I got it. I'm like, okay, great. What is it? He's like, bankruptcy. I'm like, dude, it's a budget. No, not bankruptcy. No. It was so funny. Right. So the DIY options, you can actually budget. You can make more money. You can reduce your expenses or do something together. You can talk to your creditors, get lower interest rates. You can look at conventional financing or refinancing to pay off your debts. Now, there's some strategies around that, right? You can communicate with your creditors and just say, like, I can't do this right now. You can look at help from family and friends as well. Maybe there's assets to sell. I'm pointing to jewelry, but like jewelry, art, antiques that you don't use, sell it, right? And apply it to the balance. Once we've exhausted those options, now we're moving down the line of intervention. Second set of options would be your nonprofit credit counseling, right? It could be the voluntary debt management program offered by many agencies, or the legislated program that we offer, the orderly payment of debt program. That's where we'll restructure debts and we'll drop interest rates down to 5%. It's legislated, so consumers in our program get legislated protection against creditors. And all interest rates come down to 5%. So there's no negotiation with creditors. If that doesn't work because either the debt's too high or the income's too low, then we move to the last set of options, and that's really insolvency. And there are two options available there. There's the consumer proposal. So that's where you're paying a portion of your debt back by making monthly payments. It's a term settlement or a full bankruptcy. And then those are typically the options, for paying back debt.
And what would the kind of upside and downside of each of those be? Because we know
Sure.
that everything comes with a
Absolutely.
price, with repercussions,
Yeah,
and they are not all financial as well.
that's right. That's right.
And I would also add, because it's very emotional too, right? So how do you help clients make that decision? I mean, a lot of it probably is what they're financially able. But I think going back to the emotions, to the shame and the embarrassment, because I think the scary B word is bankruptcy for me, right? And the shame that gets attached to that. So I just wanted to tack that on to say, like, how do you kind of go through that with your clients from like a personal piece?
Yeah. So I'll talk about costs first, and then I'll get into the emotions of it. So costs, costs and benefits, if you will, of the DIY, the do it yourself are, you require a tremendous amount of discipline. You got to be solid with your discipline, right? Tracking expenses, making sure your automatic payments are set, and that you're not reusing credit. If you can do that, that's great. The benefits of that are you get some muscle, or you develop some financial muscles with that discipline, and that will pay off later. And it'll have less impact on your credit if you're handling things on your own. If you move into nonprofit credit counseling, the advantages are you now have a financial counselor and a client services person to help you through your journey. So you're not alone. You have a structured debt repayment program that protects you from creditors, because most creditors will agree because they've known about nonprofit credit counseling for years. The consequence can be you may have some fees attached to that. So there could be a setup fee. We don't personally charge setup fees, but there also may be a monthly disbursement fee. So you want to be careful of that. And then you also want to ask about impact on credit. So our program and debt management programs will impact a credit rating at 7 only for 2 years after successful completion, and then it comes off. Insolvency, on the flip side, there are more impacts. So there are legislated levies that are being required to pay. So the consumer has to pay that. It's a free consult. So if anyone ever says that you need to pay to find out if you need to go bankrupt, they're lying. So thank them, be really sweet about it, but then walk away and go walk into a trustee's office for a free consult. You don't have to pay for that. But if you choose to sign on to the consumer proposal or bankruptcy, you're going to pay your legislated levies, and there's impact to credit. So for consumer proposal, the credit rating will be impacted for 3 years at a 7 after successful completion. And for bankruptcy, if it's a first, it will be a 9, which is the lowest you can get, and it'll stay on your credit report for up to 7 years post completion. So there are definitely some pros and cons to each solution.
And Stacy, just for the benefit of people who may not be familiar with that rating scale, Can you explain that sort of
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
that point scale?
So when we talk about credit and credit reports, credit scores and credit ratings, a lot of people think they're the same thing, and there's a tremendous amount of confusion, probably intentionally, because if you keep a population confused, then they pay a lot of interest, right? But we have to clarify what each of those are. So your credit report is a detailed history of your credit products and how you've behaved with them. Think about it like your resume, for your financial resume. Your credit score is a predictor that lenders or landlords or employers will use in terms of how likely you are to pay back your debts. So that goes from 300 to 900. 900 is obviously the best. And the higher your credit score means you are more likely to pay back your debts. It's a risk predictor, right? And so, of course, lenders want to reduce their risk and make money. So they want people with higher credit scores. Your credit rating is each product has a rating. So, for example, I have a Visa. Okay, we're not going to pick on the bank, but my Visa will show up on my credit report, my detailed history, and it'll show up as a trade line. So it'll say, who's the bank? What's my balance? How much? When did I open it? When was my last payment? And then I get a rating on that bad girl. So because it's a credit card, it's revolving credit. So it'll be an R for revolving. And then that can go from 1 to 9. 1 is the very best that I can have. 1 means I'm making minimum payments, I'm making higher than minimum payments, or I'm paying it off in full every month. Why identify all three of those options as a 1 is that it's fascinating for me that we'll see people with great credit because what they've done is they've mitigated it by making minimum payments, right? So they've got a really decent credit score. They just have a ton of debt, right? Because they've made minimum payments. Now, if I start missing a payment, it's going to go to a 2, then it goes to a 3, then a 4, then a 5. By the time it hits 5, I'm 120 days behind, but it hasn't hit collections yet. There's no 6. We don't know why. So we're just going to make up stories. People think, not because I'm the devil, like 666. I'm like, I don't know that Equifax is all that worried about that. But who knows? There's no 6. But let's say my debt goes into collections. I don't make my payments. It goes all the way down to a 9. So a 9 is the worst that I can have. That means my debt is in collections. I've settled on my debt. They've written off my debt. It's a bad debt or it's been a bankrupt debt. So it's the worst that I can have. If we go up 1, it's an 8. It's a repossession of an asset. So repossession of a vehicle typically. And then 7 is debt restructuring. And again, there's no 6, right? So things will have different ratings on your credit report. So for a debt management program like nonprofit credit counseling agencies do, or OPD, ours, it's a 7 on those debts, not a 9. If it was a bankruptcy, it will show up as a 9.
Gotcha.
And then Lee, you asked about the emotions of it. There's a tremendous amount of emotion when it comes to money and debt, because money's never about money. It's about how you feel about it. It can become about the money once you put your plan in play. And so really, what we do to handle the emotion is we're present with our clients, right? You can come in with big feelings and we've got virtual clinics, and we're just going to talk you through it, right? We get folks that are calling us on a monthly basis that are suicidal. We're going to walk you through it. We're going to be present with you as you feel your feeling. And then what we're going to do is we're going to remind you that you are not alone. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands actually, of people in Canada with debt. You're not alone. And your situation is not as bad as you think it is, right? Story in your head is typically worse than the reality of it. And then what we do is we start going through a budget. The hardest part is barfing it all out on paper, right? Because now you got to talk about all your expenses and all your debts. But as soon as you get all that out, now we move into solutions. And then by talking with solutions, what we're talking about with consumers is, what do you want? It's your money and it's your debt. It's not mine. What do you want? Right? If somebody has, you can just tell by the financials that they're bankrupt, right? They've got way too much debt. Then what we talk about is we try and normalize the situation. It's not like the 1950s where if you went bankrupt, like your life was over, right? Life moves on. It's a fresh start. And, for me, when I talk with clients, Lee, I always ask them, like, look, did you defraud did you defraud your creditors? And they're all horrified, like, no, of course not. Okay. So then I'm going to guess TD's going to be fine. Like, TD's not going to go bankrupt because you do, right? Like, they're going to be okay. And it's really I know it sounds weird, but it's really quite beautiful to watch the fact that Canadian consumers are highly responsible, accountable human beings. I've had in my career, and it's been almost 18 years in this industry, I've had one client say, look, I don't want to pay interest. I want a deal on this and I don't want to pay. Okay, well, that's not the point of the program, right? Like people want to pay it back and they feel terrible when they can't. So it's just normalizing that. Look, you went in it with the best of intentions. You did it to support your family or live your life. You weren't fraudulent. So let's all take a big deep breath, and then let's also connect you to, in this situation, it would be a licensed insolvency trustee because we have a curated list. We don't send them to anybody. Now they can go to anybody they want, but we curate our list because we look for feedback from our clients about how our trustees that we refer to treat our clients. These are folks that are not accepting referrals from debt brokers. They're not working with those, and they're respectful to our clients. So then it's that handover, like you're going to be okay. And I'm going to give you, I'm not going to give you, you can choose who you go to. But if you need some tender love and care, you can talk to so and so.
Now, you mentioned that it would be great if some of your clients who come in the door would have come in a year before. What do you consider some of the glaring red flags that when you find yourself in the situation, your first call should be to credit counseling and not, let's say, wait another year? Or I think sometimes the average I've heard is like 2 to 3 years
Much
before
longer
they,
than
yeah, before they come and ask for help. And of course, the interest payments, all that is still compounding, right? Every single day. And so what are some of the things where if someone's listening and they're, thinking about maybe perhaps I'm in trouble, what are the glaring red flags?
Mhm. Yeah. The first, I had a coach tell me years ago, Lee, your body will always tell you the truth. Your head lies and my heart lies all the time, right? But my body is a truth teller.
Hmm.
And so what I always suggest is listen to your body. When you think of your financial situation, does your chest open up and you've got more air in your lungs and you can breathe and you got your chin up and you're looking forward? Or you curl onto yourself and it feels stressful and it makes you feel sick, or it bites you in the liver, right? Your pachinka, like, oh, like use your body. Are you
Uh-huh.
losing sleep at night, worrying about money?
Mm.
Are you fighting with your person about money? Because nothing says love like a good money fight at 11 o'clock, right? You can't call anyone. You can't do anything about it. So my first money fight with my husband, he went to bed and I started to split our assets and planned our divorce. And in the morning, he's like, morning, babe. And I'm like, we're done. And he's like, what? I just needed to nap. Like, right? But if you're fighting with your person about money, that's a big flag. If you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, grabbing money off the Visa and paying the MasterCard, that's a flag. Are you getting collection calls, past due notices? Are you avoiding your mail? If you think about going to your mail, does it give you a sick stomach like a sick feeling in your stomach? Those are signs, right? Uh, if you're always worried about money. And what people worry about is that if they come and see a credit counselor, A, they're admitting that there's a problem, okay? And B, it impacts their credit. A conversation with me, and I don't mean me as the CEO, but me as a financial counselor, will impact nobody's credit. I don't talk about it with anybody. I don't report it to anybody. If they want to go talk about it, that's their business. But it goes in the vault. It dies with me, right? If they wish to continue on and have establish a repayment plan, then of course we've got to inform their creditors and whatnot. But otherwise, a conversation has no impact on anybody's credit. It just takes time. And I always say, like for us, we have an on-demand system. So you can call in and then you'll get into the queue and speak with a counselor right away. You can take 5 minutes because you just have a question about Equifax, or you take an hour and a half because that's what you need. We've got the time. We're here to help.
Stacey, you talked a little bit earlier about how there's no typical client and the assumption that everybody dealing with debt problems has an income problem, that it's only low income people, which we know isn't true. You can absolutely be going head over heels in debt with a six-figure income. But I'm wondering, are there common situations that typically lead people to seek out credit counseling?
Absolutely. Yeah. And oftentimes it's an event or an economic shock, right? If somebody loses their job, that will throw a budget out the window probably within 48 hours, right? Like you need to make some real changes real fast. So losing one's job or losing hours, can certainly impact that. Somebody getting hurt or sick, again, it's impacting income. We get that. Sometimes when people are getting sued, they'll give us a call, right? You get the notice of claim and you start to panic because, oh my God, so now you call. Certainly, we see that. The dissolution of a relationship, right? The divorce, separation, etc. You've got two incomes running one household. Now you move
Mhm.
to two incomes running two households and child support, and that can get real tense real fast. Plus, you've got all the feelings around it. We also see addictions, right? If you want to snort it, drink it, or pull it, like a I don't gamble, but like casino, right? You can ruin your life and your financial life pretty quickly. So we definitely see that. And then we just see a lifetime of, we weren't taught about money. We didn't necessarily know how to handle it. We're doing our best. In Alberta, we kind of live and die by the oil patch, right? So when things are good, all of us are buying our toys and financing them. And when things are bad, all those toys are getting returned.
Repossessed.
Absolutely, right? So we see the economic issues too with, the economy. I have to imagine, I'm not in Ontario anymore, but, steel, lumber in BC, we've got some real
Mm.
economic issues in Canada.
Are you seeing, you mentioned gambling, but one of the things that Lee and I have been sort of chatting about and seeing articles about is this sports betting and the plethora of, I mean, every ad I gather on sporting events is all about this online gambling and stuff, and that it's a real problem, particularly for young men. Do you
Right.
see that?
We're going to see more of it. See, Ontario opened it up a few years ago, and that's where it just exploded, right? But
Wow.
it was only in Ontario for it to start. I was at a gambling conference, a symposium a couple months ago, and Alberta's going to open up their iGaming fairly soon. So yeah, we'll definitely see it, and I'm most definitely worried about young men because they tend to gamble
Mm.
more. They certainly online betting, etc. And boy, you can ruin a life real fast with online gambling
And not ask for help.
and not ask for help, right?
Yeah.
You've got athletes promoting, and I don't care that Connor McDavid, go Oilers, but is promoting the safe use of gambling. He's promoting gambling, right?
Yeah.
And, so you've got folks that, young men are want to emulate, want to be like, and consider role models promoting this.
Yeah. Scary.
Bad stuff. It is scary,
No, to
scary
be
stuff.
clear, I'm not a gambler personally. It's just not my thing. I work too hard for my money. I'd rather spend it on a coffee and a good book than gambling. That's just a preference. So I don't have a moral objection to it. I don't care. And like addiction, like alcohol, cannabis, etc., most people don't have problems with it, right? But you do have a certain population, a certain percentage of the population that are problem gamblers, are addicts, are alcoholics that make life for them and their community, quite difficult. So I think, if we're going to promote gambling, we better promote a whole lot of helping services and fund those services handsomely, so that we can support these young men and women, of course, who are taking these chances and not realizing the house always wins.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think, again, I don't know, like the ease of access to things that are, inherently not good for us. And to your point, yeah, it's not that everybody who takes part in these develops an addiction, but we also have to be cognizant that the way they build some of these things are meant to be addictive, right? Like if you go,
Social media.
yeah, but if you go like even to a casino, right? Like they're pumping in oxygen, they want you to stay awake, everything's shiny and brightly lit. And so how do you possibly fight against that sometimes if you're, someone who's going in thinking, "Oh, this might be fun and I'm going to do it with my friends," and it's like a little, group activity and then you kind of get sucked into it. Like that's what terrifies me.
It does, right? But I do think that there are ways to manage it and mitigate that, right? You can shop with cash. You can bring $100 and that's all you got. And you don't touch your credit cards and you leave them at home, right? There are ways to handle it, I think, you know, but to your point, it is most definitely intended to influence young minds to gamble. And, if you go to a casino, it's not just young folks.
Yes.
It
It's
ain't just
true.
young men. We see a
Yeah.
lot of seniors there, right?
Yep.
That are spending a lot of their spare time gambling.
So I've been doing some research on dopamine, which Lee knows, and she knows how
Yep.
terrified I am by it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, well, there's actually a really good episode of a podcast called Hidden Brain. And we'll put a link to that in the program notes. But what I want to say is that your brain chemistry is actually set up for it to be addicting. And it is a terrifying thing. So
It is.
taking those mitigating steps.
Look at social media, right? I mean, granted, I have a whole lot of feelings about it. I think it's a bit of a scourge, on humanity and humanity's brain. But, if we're constantly at our phones and getting the hit, what's happening at the casino or what's happening with online gambling? Like, I think it's just that
Scary
much
stuff.
more.
Scary stuff. Scary stuff. So, well, there's a rabbit hole.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna nip that in the bud. So when someone comes to you for the first time, so I'm assuming they're gonna call, book an appointment. What can they expect? What does that process feel like or look like?
They're actually going to call and they're going to talk with a counselor right away. That's what it feels like. So we always say, when you're ready to call, we're ready to answer. They're going to call and we're just going to ask them, okay, tell us about what's going on for you. And, they're going to tell us the story. And then we're going to go, okay, do you have time to kind of get into the numbers? Or do you want to call back when you do have to? Let's assume they do. Then we're going to get into the numbers. And what we're asking about is, income, assets, and liabilities, monthly expenses, and all their debt. And with all that information, Lee, then what we can do is lay out some options available to that person based on their numbers. They'll walk away with a budget. They'll walk away with a plan. They'll also, if necessary, have referrals, to resources in the community as well. They'll be met with compassion and solutions. We're very solution focused.
We know that, and you've talked about the impact of debt on mental health, and it's not just mental health. Of course, it's physical health. I mean, there is really good data on this, on illness, on all kinds of things. It's really frightening. Even things like divorce, relationships, all of that kind of stuff. What is the reaction? How do clients typically react once the process has started? Do you see a change?
Oh, yes. So significant. Think about when you've got a story in your head and you are so ashamed of it, right? And just how the noise that's going on in your head. And then when you talk with someone and Brene Brown talks about that, right? When you kind of let it out with a trusted person and they don't point and shame or point and laugh, right? They actually are just present. That actually allows you to co-regulate your system, right? Your nervous system will relax. You can breathe more. You'll see people's shoulders move back, like open up. Their chest opens up a bit more. They can breathe. Their chin will come up a bit. You'll hear it in their voice and they will calm down. Because I'm a coach, I use scaling a lot, right? So I'll ask at the beginning, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how stressed are you? Well, you're usually getting 8, 9, or 10. And then at the end you go, okay, so based on everything we've talked about, like you were saying, like you were a 9 out of 10 of stress. Like, where's your stress now? Oh, I'm at a 6. Okay, well, 6 is a whole lot more manageable than 9, right? Okay, at 6, you can think. At 9, you can't, right? So people react by calming down, right? And there's something about what happens in your body when you feel not judged, when you feel compassion. And look, I love love, right? So I was talking about loving people, but very like appropriate, professional, not touching kind of ways. But like when you can feel some love, right? Like, you're not the worst human being in the world. Because the story in your head is that you are the worst human being in the world.
Yeah.
And we're just here to tell you you're not.
Yeah. I've done a lot of interviews with, folks like you and with trustees, etc. And the one thing I hear over and over again is that their clients typically are like, I wish I'd come sooner. I wish I'd come sooner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we also and you guys should be teaching this in schools because
Well, yeah. We get that one all the time. Absolutely.
So I think one thing is super important to know. There's a lot of noise in every industry, and I think some of the worst is in the financial sphere. Can we talk a bit about, what a nonprofit counseling service is and what are some of the alternatives, right? Because they're also for fee services that kind of get,
Sure.
mixed in. And also, if we want to just take a look at the certifications, we always talk about make sure you know who you're talking to because you mentioned finfluencers before. Like they could be selling you things, they could be being paid in a variety of ways. And so I'm really understanding the difference and the importance of working with qualified professionals. But I'm going to leave that with you, Stace.
I think it's a great question because, when it comes to money, like no, money is one of the most important decisions you make in your life, and having the right people on your team, I think makes the difference. And you want the right advice. So for nonprofit credit counseling agencies that are accredited through Credit Counseling Canada, which we are, our counselors are required to be certified financial counselors. That is a requirement. And then as an agency, we are required to be accredited through them. What that means is there's requirements for that. We have to be a nonprofit. We have to be run by a volunteer board of directors. Our financials are audited every year and submitted, and we submit our result up to the association for reporting. So that's an important thing to distinguish for nonprofit credit counseling is the accreditation requirements. We don't expect consumers to pay for referrals. It's not appropriate. And so that is forbidden in our association. And so, those qualifications are really important. In terms of nonprofit versus for-profit, there are for-profit organizations that offer similar services, but the consumer will pay the fees and then the creditors may pay them as well. There are debt brokers, and this is a scourge, not to use that word again, but a real scourge in Canada's landscape. These are folks that are accepting payment for referrals to licensed insolvency trustees. It's an offensive, unnecessary, and completely illegitimate service. And why I say that is that any consumer can walk into a licensed insolvency trustee's office for free. It's a free consult. If that is a legitimate solution for them, then and they wish to do it, then of course you pay your legislated fees. But otherwise you don't. Any nonprofit credit counseling agency out of Credit Counseling Canada will never charge for a referral to a licensed insolvency trustee. We'll run all the numbers, and based on the numbers we'll tell if somebody's insolvent, but we'll never charge them for a referral. Again, that's a free service. Like that's free. So these debt brokers are problematic for consumers.
How do you know if it's a debt broker? What's the red flag? Because I know I hear that people didn't realize that, like
Yeah.
they didn't know this was going to happen.
Yep. The red flag is fees. Automatically, it's fees. If I have to pay for someone to consult on my financial situation, that is right there. There's your red flag. That service is available at nonprofit credit counseling agencies for free. You don't have to pay for it. So, and then it becomes we're going to negotiate on your behalf to the licensed insolvency trustee. No, you're actually not. It's not your job. There is no negotiation. That is between the licensed insolvency trustee, the consumer, and their creditors. We don't need a debt broker on the side, messing things up. So fees for me are everything. The challenge with money, though, is that because when we've got debt, we're ashamed. And because we're ashamed, we don't ask for the right questions. How are you funded? Like, what is your funding model? Like for us, with nonprofit credit counseling agencies, all the services are free. If they establish a debt management program or an orderly payment of debt program, then there may be some fees associated with that. Small fees that are capped and can be waived, right? So fees is a big thing. And when people talk about negotiating with creditors, that's a big flag as well for me. So this is where people really just need to ask the questions. How are you accredited? How are you trained? What's your certification? Who's your accreditation body? Right? I can answer that right away. And what you also look for is people getting shifty, and whether that's their physical body getting shifty or their mouth getting shifty. What that means is, oh, how are you paid? Well, da, 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 and they start to dance around. If I can't answer that with a straight face automatically, that's a problem, right? It's your money. Even though it's your debt, it is still your debt, right? You deserve to be treated well, and you deserve to be treated within the rules of, our society.
So how do you, as a not-for-profit credit agency, how do you work with the creditors?
So we work with creditors through the Orderly Payment of Debt program. And what that means is our program is legislated through the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. Even though our clients are not insolvent, it still is through the Act. And so once they sign on to the program, we will send out notice to creditors, and they've got 30 days to object. They typically don't, But where they'll object is maybe it's a higher balance or it's a joint debt. And then we just go back and forth with the creditor until we're all ready to go. And then within 30 days, they've all signed on, and then we activate the file and the client makes the payments. Because we've been working with creditors for nearly 30 years, they know who we are. We have really good relationships with them. And so we rarely get a debt rejected, right? And then they have to comply based on legislation as well. But we're the only ones in Canada that offer the orderly payment to debt program.
So at the end of each Not Just Money episode, we typically sum up with 3 key learnings that we want our listeners to take away with them. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to ask Stacy to do that for us. So Stacy, what are the 3 things that you want people who might be struggling with debt to know about? To know about when and why and how to get help?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. The first one is know that you are not alone. You are not alone, even though you feel alone in your debt. We'll open up the door, we'll turn the lights on, and you don't have to feel ashamed. So 1, you're not alone. Number 2, help is available. And there are a lot more options available when you get help sooner. And 3 is recognize the signs and symptoms of when you need help, right? What does it feel like in my body? Am I missing sleep? Am I fighting with my person? Am I getting collection calls? Am I robbing Peter to pay Paul? Am I just always worried about money? If you are, give us a call. It has no impact on your credit. It has no impact on your wallet. It just has impact on your time. But within an hour, you can walk away with a whole plan.
Well, Stacy, thank you for that very warm hug, even though it was virtual. And thank you so much for being here.
Oh my goodness. It was so lovely to hang out with you too. Oh, I feel like we got the band back together again.
For those of you who may be struggling with debt, check the podcast notes for links to Money Mentors or visit Credit Counselling Canada's website at creditcounselingcanada.ca to find your local nonprofit credit counseling agency.
And we can't say this strongly enough. If you are in debt, please reach out for help and do it sooner rather than later. So that's it for today.
Good talk. You've been listening to Not Just Money with Doretta and Lee. Click on the show's description for links to resources related to today's conversation. Our aim is to share sources that provide objective information that can help you make informed financial decisions. Please rate and review our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at notjustmoneypodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to be featured on the show, you can send us your questions and comments by a written email, audio file, or video file. Please include your name and city. This show is produced and edited by Lee, with original music by Leo Zhang cello and artwork by John Tu. Now for some legalese. Please note that the views expressed by our hosts and guests are theirs alone and should not be viewed as financial advice. This podcast is intended to be entertainment and educational in nature. Please seek additional professional support or information before acting on any podcast information. As always, good talk.